Welcome to the series, From Lovers to Strangers, The Enemies of Intimacy by Dr. Gerald Mann. Dr. Mann is the senior pastor at the Riverbend Church in Austin, Texas. Let's join Dr. Mann for more of The Enemies of Intimacy.
When there's a stranger in your house, that's what we've been talking about for about the last 5 weeks. The kinds of things that cause people who love each other and live together in the same home to become strangers. What are the causes of estrangement in relationships? And today I'm going to talk about unplanned passages, not getting ready for the passages that we go through, for the changes in life. And I want to read from 2 Samuel, the 11th chapter, a passage that most of you read when you were in Bible school as children. It's the story of David. It says, in the springtime, when the kings usually went to war, David sent Joab with his officers and the Israelite army, and they went and defeated the Ammonites and besieged the city of Rabbah. But David himself stayed at home. And one day late in the afternoon, after he got up from his nap, he was walking about on the roof of the palace. As he walked around up there, he saw a woman taking a bath in her house. She was very beautiful. So he sent his messenger to find out who she was, and he learned that her name was Bathsheba, the daughter of Eliam, and the wife of Uriah the Hittite. So David sent his messengers to get her, and they brought her to David, and he committed adultery with her. Unplanned passages, one of the main causes of estrangement in our own homes. We got married in a small town. She was 18 and I was 20, and we had all the stuff that goes with one of the big weddings. We had all these bridesmaids and all this frills and stuff and lace and flowers, and it was sort of an event, you know, in this little small church where we got married, and the pastor probably had never had a full house over a couple of times in his whole tenure there, and as we kissed and got ready to walk down, you know, the preacher's always supposed to say something dramatic. Well, in our case, instead of saying, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. and Mrs. Gerald Mann or whatever, he says, and they lived happily ever after. And 1 year later, we had a baby. We were about to starve to death, and we didn't like each other, and I would love to have hit him in the mouth if I could have found him. We grew up with that myth that when you reach adulthood and you get married, that life is static. When you're little, you want to be big, because when you're big, you're finished, right? You're matured and you're completed. Wrong. One of the great myths we live with is that we don't go through what Gail Sheehy calls passages. Life is not a destination. Life is always a journey, and we're always changing. And I think one of the number one causes of estrangement in relationships is that we're not prepared for these passages, for these tremendous changes that come our way. And so this morning I want to talk about how do we get ready for passages, for changes. David's adultery in the Old Testament is a grand example of somebody who was unprepared for the great changes that occur in life. He had a top-of-the-palace mentality. As you know, he was a giant killer. He was a warrior. He was a king. He was a statesman. He was a poet. He accomplished all of this before he reached his middle years, and now he thought, I've arrived, and happily ever after. And so he was walking about on the top of his palace, and I think there's such strong symbolism in that. He thought he had it made, but life was not finished. And the result was that he ended up estranged from himself and from the people he loved and from God. How do we get ready for passages? Well, I want to use 3 principles this morning to try to help you have some handles to hang your hat on. 3 principles on how to plan for the inevitable changes that are going to threaten your relationships. One principle I call the Expectant, Deflected principle. I used to room with an Olympic boxer, and he said the punches that always knock you out are the ones you never see coming. You never see the punch that knocks you out. And that's true in life. If you can expect them, you can deflect them. And there are 2 or 3 changes, areas of change, or punches that life is going to throw at you that you better get ready for, because they're going to happen to every one of us. One of the punches that comes at our relationships has to do with what I call newcomers, the birth of a child. Nobody ever told me that a child which that's why we got married, was to have children, and that's what we wanted, and we all planned for it, or we didn't plan for it, as the case might be. But everybody wanted the joy of having a child. But nobody ever told me that that child would change the chemistry of the relationship. And nobody told me when that child underwent that mutation called adolescence that there would be a change in the chemistry of our relationship. And we've never had an empty nest, but I'm told, and we'll never have an empty nest. When our last one leaves, we'll be 67 years old. But that's high school. But nobody ever told me that these would be threats to my... But just write it down. Here's a rule. Strangers are always estrangers in your relationship. Whether it's bringing in relatives or children or grandchildren. We've had probably one of the most straining times of intimacy in our marriage in 33 years because we had a 3-year-old granddaughter come a year ago. Do you realize how few meaningful conversations you can have with a 3-year-old? I forgot. I don't know how I raised the first 3. We must have smothered them a lot or something. I don't know. But a lady told me the other day, you'd be surprised, preacher, but we finally got 2 dogs. The nest's been empty for 20 years. We brought in 2 dogs, and they have changed our relationship. Strangers are always estrangers. Get ready for another change that has to do with your goals, your dreams, your ambitions. What happens is we set plans, we set dreams when we're 20, and when we're 40, one of 3 things has happened. Most often we didn't reach what we planned for. I was going to be the greatest preacher in the world, wealthy, a movie star, a corporate executive, and all of that, and a great writer by the time I was 40. Wrong. So we have to adjust to that, and that threatens a relationship. Or, like David, we reach our goals, and we get into the so what syndrome. He had achieved everything, so what? So he walks around on the palace and watches women take a bath and goes middle-aged crazy. Whatever the version. Or and this has happened to many of us in this congregation, especially with the economic downturn, we reach our goals and then we lose our dreams. And that sets in a grief experience, and all of these things will happen to you. The third punch that life's going to throw at you has to do with aging. What happens is when we get older, we become aware that we're dying. When you're young, you're never going to die. But when the sand in the glass begins to run out and you can see there's more in the bottom than there is at the top, then some funny things happen to you. Ladies, when your husband gets 40 to 50, don't be surprised if he gets cranky. Don't get surprised if he gets hypercritical. You can't do anything right. Don't be surprised if he gets in a hurry. He wants everything now. He wants his car to run fast. He wants his breakfast quicker than before. He wants everything right now. And it's because there's a great urgency that sets into his life. All of these jokes we make about PMS and menopause and middle-aged crazies are simply our ways of talking about the fact that as you get older, it's going to throw a punch at your relationship. If you can expect these, then you can deflect them. But how do you deflect them? Well, let me go to the second principle. I call it the upstream, downstream principle. Relationships are like rivers. Whatever you put in the headwaters, upstream of a river, it's going to show up downstream at the mouth. Have you ever noticed how personality traits get magnified the older people get? I know a lady who's now 75, and I knew her when she was about 30, and she was a whiner. That's how she got her way. She was a sort of a whiner. Now she's a full-blown whiner. I knew a guy who threw fits, and he was sort of a fit thrower. Now he's a full-fledged, 100% fit thrower. What begins upstream always shows up downstream, and the same thing is true with your relationships. And there's some things you can begin to put in your relationship upstream that will bear fruit downstream. And I want to talk about 3 of these. They have to do with friendship. First is you need to start developing a friendship with yourself. And what does that mean, to get to be friends with yourself? It means to like yourself apart from what you do and what you have. Now, what am I talking about? Well, let's look at David. David, for all of his accomplishments, never developed an inward friendship with himself. He was what he did. He was a giant killer, a king, an artist, etc. He was what he had, palaces and gold and armies, but he was never anybody apart from what he had and what he did. And so when he got all he wanted, and when he had done all that he wanted to do, he didn't even know himself. He had never developed an inward friendship with himself. How much time do you spend alone? And when you spend your time alone, how much do you enjoy yourself? Do you know that most suicides occur when people are alone during the weekends or during holidays? And many people believe it's because some of us literally don't know what to do with ourselves when we're by ourselves. You need to start to make friends. Who are you apart from what you have and what you do? I asked myself the question not long ago, what could I absolutely do without? And what could I not do without? What are the things that I'm attached to that I couldn't live without? It's very revealing. Who are you apart from what you have and what you... Have you listened to people who meet each other? Have you listened, or when you meet a new person, it isn't long till we ask the question, what do you do? And it isn't long before we start telling each other what we have. Who are you apart from what you do and what you have? Make friends with yourself. Make friends with each other. It is one thing to love each other, but it is quite another thing to like each other. Lois and I had a great big old fight last week, and we're unlike all the other preachers in the world. They all have perfect relationships, but we don't. We have one like yours. It's just sometimes downright snotty. She said to me, Gerald, my love, whenever she says my love, get ready, watch out, that's right. She says, we both have furniture disease, right? Our chest is falling in our drawers, okay? We both have furniture disease. And every time you look at me and I'm no longer the sweetheart of Sigma Chi and the bloom has come off the rose, and every time you look at my gray hair and my wrinkles and my proportions have changed, you get awfully cranky and you start talking to me about doing things that are impossible for me to do. It would be nice, my love, if you would understand that what you see in me reminds you of what you don't like in you. And we both started laughing. We did. We both started laughing because there was humor and there was friendship. Without friendship, that would have only caused me to retaliate. I don't know what the secret of friendship is, but I know that if you want to start putting some good stuff upstream so that when the passages of life happen, you keep from polluting downstream, then start putting friendship with each other. David never did that. He had wives, but he never had a mate. He had offspring, but he never had a son or a daughter. He had associates, but he never had a friend. He didn't make friends with significant others. And the third thing you can put in upstream is a friendship with God. And what do I mean by friendship with God? Well, we talk a lot about going to church regularly, and we talk about praying, and we talk about reading the Bible. And you know, it occurred to me that all of that is useless unless it results in an intimacy with God. There's no use to go to church if it doesn't strengthen your friendship with... What is church? Church is where a group of friends gather to become friends with God, or it's not church. It's just a show. What is the purpose of prayer? Well, most of us think the purpose of prayer is to change God's mind. God, please don't let this happen, or please let this happen, or how much can I beg you to get you to do what I want? Prayer is designed to change those of us who pray. It's designed to put us in a place where God's an intimate friend. What about Bible study? I know some people who know the Bible from cover to cover, but it never has said anything to them. What does the Bible say to you as far... The whole purpose of Riverbend, the thing we designed this thing for, our mission before God, is to try to effect a friendship between you and the Father. People say, why do you have this open membership policy? The other day, a preacher on local television said that we just not only took them any way we could get them, we took everything. He said we took all kinds of sinners, and I don't know what, the guy must not have anything to preach about because he just goes up and down. And it just gives us good, good PR, and he spells our name right, so I hope he keeps it up. But I want this church to be known as a place where we affect friendships between you and the Father. So, the expected, deflected. There's some punches that life's going to throw at you. Expect them. How do you deflect them? Begin to put in upstream, downstream, some things that will strengthen your relationship with each other and yourself and God. The third principle I want to talk about is what I call the exit-entrance principle. Every exit is also an entrance. Have you ever thought about that? Most of us go through a passage in life and we think the end of the world has come, that we'll never see it again and it's gone, and we grieve over loss. If we could only understand that every exit in life is also an entrance. The end of an old world is also the beginning of a new world. David is a great example of that. He went on and committed adultery. He had the woman's husband murdered. He did all kinds of crooked things and ruined his life completely. The child that was born out of that union was born dead. And there was a great disgrace in the land and in his life. But he started over. He made a new beginning. And the way he did it was by realizing that every exit is also an entrance. You can begin again. Sam Keene, I think it was, told a great story. He said when he was a young preacher, he went to see an old man who was dying of cancer. And he'd been dying for a long time, and he knew that the time was near. And Sam Keene said he was a young preacher, and he didn't know what to say, and so he just sat there for a while and said the old man reached over and patted him on the shoulder and said, "Don't grieve." He said, "Let me tell you how I'm looking at my death." He said, "I've already died many times. When I left the womb and came into a cold world, I left a warm, cozy, safe place, and I was born into a threatening place. And then when I left childhood and the protection of my family and moved into the awesomeness of adolescence, it was a strange and hostile environment. But I lived through that. And then when I left home and went to school, I died, and I moved into a new life. And when I got married, I left singleness behind, and I moved into doubleness. And then when my wife died, all of that was changed." But he said, "I found that throughout my life, every exit has also been an entrance." And he said, "So that's how I'm looking at my death. That to leave this life is not the end, but it is the beginning of something else." And I've always remembered that. Every exit is also an entrance. Your lives are going to change inexorably, inevitably. If you could, when the next passage comes, the next threat to your relationship comes, if you could only realize, okay, the end of a chapter has come, but the beginning of a new chapter has begun. Every exit is also an entrance. Ultimately, I don't think we can look forward anyway in life, and we can go through the passages without some kind of faith in our Lord Jesus Christ. I would advise you today to start by putting into the headwaters of your life a relationship with the Father through Jesus Christ. Passages are going to come. It's not going to be happily ever after. If you can expect them, you can deflect them. If you begin right now to put in some good stuff upstream, it will show up downstream. And if you can just remember that every time you exit one form of existence, you enter a new one, then life can be fun. I talked to an 82-year-old guy this week, and I've known him a long time, and I said to him, "Look, can you tell me anything about your sex life?" He said, "What do you want to know?" I said, "Well, I just want to know, when does sexual desire go away?" And he said, "Well, for some people it doesn't go away at all, I guess." He said, "I know a guy who was 85 and he married a 25-year-old woman. And she called him from the doctor and said, 'This is your loving baby doll, and you're not going to believe this, but I'm pregnant.' And the old guy said, 'Which baby doll is this?'" Never mind. He said, but anyway, after the joke, he told me, he said, "My sex drive is not what it used to be." He said, "But you know what? My wife and I have moved into a whole new stage of existence where sex is funny and senility is fun." I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Everybody expects old people to be senile. So we just act senile. He said, they'll open doors for you, they'll drive you around, they'll let you in the line, they'll put you in the front of the grocery line. He said, we just snicker and walk right up to the front of the line, you know. To go to get our car washed, we just drive in front of everybody else. He said, we sit down on the lake and hold hands and watch the rituals of springtime. Sex is funny and senility is fun. What a healthy way to look at life. But I neglect to tell you that this fella and his wife are two of the most growing, committed Christians that have built in concert a relationship to the Father. So, life's going to be tough. Punches are coming your way. But every exit is an entrance. And I hope today that you will make a step to put into the headwaters of your life a relationship with our Father through Jesus Christ.
Thank you for joining us for the series, The Enemies of Intimacy.